Sacramento, California, born and raised. And Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Like always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. As you guys can see, I'm back on recording from my phone. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. My little studio that I have in my room is in the midst of being kind of remodeled and move around, so there's not really space for me to record podcasts at the moment. So for the time being, I'll be recording from my phone probably for the next couple of episodes. But today on Keek on the Mic, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I hope I can do this every day and bring you guys the latest news and storylines on the Chicago Bears training camp. So like always, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to follow along on all the latest Chicago Bears news and storylines regarding the Chicago Bears training camp. So a lot of stuff actually happened today on day 2 of the Chicago Bears training camp. Obviously, yesterday was the reporting day for the Chicago Bears players on the roster, but today was the first day of practice. So I'm going to go through some of the storylines that kind of caught my attention and just break everything down for you guys here on the podcast. So here we go. The first big storyline of today's practice is that Roquan Smith was in attendance. He was seen. Obviously, he wasn't participating. The more shocking news about Roquan Smith today was that Matt Eberflus stated that they have put him on the PUP list, so the physically unable to perform list, and that kind of regards from his physical. I'm not sure if he has any super major injury or if that's just a way for him just not to participate until he gets his big payday. I'm not really sure the circumstance. I'll try my best to keep you guys updated on that Roquan Smith situation, but at the moment, he is on the PUP list for right now. He was seen riding a little exercise bike on the field while his other teammates were practicing. So I guess that is a good sign. I think this is more probably just a precaution until he hopefully gets that extension from Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears. But at the moment, he is on the PUP list. And Matt Eberflus also made it known that he will play the will linebacker position in his new defense that he's bringing over to Chicago. And basically, when asked about the whole Roquan Smith contract situation, he said that he didn't want to get into that. So at the moment, we don't know anything about Roquan other than that he's going to play the will linebacker spot in this new defense, and that he is now on the PUP list for the Chicago Bears to start this year's training camp. Number 2 on my list is that Robert Quinn participated in today's practice. Obviously, he reported the training camp yesterday, which was big news to some people, and other people, they weren't really shocked about the news of him actually reporting. But he did participate in today's practice, which was a welcome sign for the Chicago Bears defense. And he also stated in his press conference after practice that he would like to remain with the Chicago Bears and he does not want to be traded. And he also explained the reason for him missing the mandatory minicamp for the Chicago Bears was more trying to take care of his body and get himself right mentally. He also said that this is his 12th season in the NFL, so he knows that he has to take extra precaution to make sure he's taking good care of his body, which makes total sense. And obviously, this is a good example of media around the situation of especially Robert Quinn kind of blowing things out of proportion. It seems like even despite the rebuild the Chicago Bears are going through, right, he is more than happy to remain a Chicago Bear and try to help this team win. And just regarding the Robert Quinn situation, this is good news. Obviously, I've repeated it so much here on the podcast that if Robert Quinn remains a Chicago Bear, that's a win for the football team. He's a great pass rusher. I think he's going to be an excellent piece to this Matt Eberflus defense that he's bringing to Chicago. But at the same time, if the Chicago Bears do trade him and it's the right price, I think that's also very good news. That means you stack up on draft picks for next year. But it sounds like Robert Quinn has no intentions whatsoever of wanting to be traded. So that is really good news for Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears. So like the Roquan Smith situation, I will keep you guys updated on everything about Robert Quinn as it comes to my attention. The third thing on my list, the third storyline of this Chicago Bears training camp day one, is the offensive line competition. Obviously, I posted this on my community page on YouTube, but Ryan Poles improved the offensive line for basically a bargain price in a big way by adding two possible starters and left tackle Riley Reiff and right guard Michael Schofield, which Michael Schofield is a native of the Illinois area. He grew up a Chicago Bears fan, so that was a pretty cool storyline. But these guys are not great by any means. They are on the older side. They're not long-term answers for the Chicago Bears, but these two guys can be instant starters for the Chicago Bears and provide very good play for this Chicago Bears offensive line. And according to Phil Yates, Reiff's one-year deal, worth up to $12.5 million, is structured in a way where it'll only count for $3 million against the cap. And Michael Schofield's deal is the veteran salary benefit deal, which will cost the Bears under $1 million. That means that the Bears added two starters for only $4 million. So that is a very good job by Ryan Poles, adding to the offensive line in a big way. Obviously, the left tackle spot was a big deal, and obviously right guard was a huge gaping hole, especially after Dakota Dozier went down. But obviously Michael Schofield is a major upgrade over Dakota Dozier and even Sam Mustipher. And obviously when you look at the left tackle spot, right now we were looking at either Braxton Jones or Larry Borum, but I feel like Riley Reiff is also a huge upgrade over those two guys at left tackle. And obviously Riley Reiff can also play the right tackle position as well, but I think he will pencil in at left tackle. So the likely starting five after adding those two guys, and I really like this starting five, would be left tackle Riley Reiff, left guard Cody Whitehair, center Lucas Patrick, right guard Michael Schofield, and right tackle either Larry Borum, Tevin Jenkins, or Braxton Jones. And obviously in today's practice, the starting five to open up training camp for the Chicago Bears, they tested out Braxton Jones at left tackle, and they started out with Larry Borum at the right side. But I'm pretty sure after Riley Reiff and Michael Schofield get caught up to speed for the next couple of days, they will pencil those two guys in at the starters for the left tackle spots and the right guard position, leaving Larry Borum, Tevin Jenkins, and Braxton Jones all fighting out for that lone right tackle spot. So all I really have to say about the offensive line right now is that I'm really happy what Ryan Poles did for this offensive line. Added a lot of competition, added a lot of solid veterans. They're not game busters or great by any means at this point in their career, but these guys are all solid. So I'm really excited to see the competition, especially at the right tackle spot, and just see how this plays out. And I can just tell you that this offensive line is a whole lot better than it was 3 days ago. So I'm really excited to see what happens in regards to this offensive line. Number 4 on the list, as the players reported yesterday for the Chicago Bears training camp, Matt Eberflus put all the players through a conditioning test, and I guess everyone passed. So obviously, during mandatory minicamp, Matt Eberflus made it very, very known that he told the players on the roster saying, you better come back conditioned and ready. And all the players obviously listened. They grinded during that little short period of time before reporting back to training camp, and everyone passed the conditioning test. And all you have to say about Matt Eberflus right now is that he is setting the standard for this Bears team and holding everyone accountable, even for the little mistakes. Obviously, Jalen Johnson came out yesterday in his little press conference after reporting to training camp and saying even the little details. These coaches, including Matt Eberflus, and it starts with Matt Eberflus, are calling all the players out, even for the little mistakes, and setting the standard for this new Chicago Bears team, and I absolutely love it. This is what Matt Eberflus had to say in his press conference after the first day of Bears training camp. We've got to be a hard team. We can't live soft and play hard. You just can't do it. That's not the way football is. So we got to play hard and be a hard team. All I have to say is that I absolutely love the standard that Matt Eberflus is holding these players to. And all I have to say is that this Chicago Bears team will be disciplined. I'm pretty sure once it's all said and done, when we get to the regular season, you won't see a lot of penalties, right? You won't see a lot of turnovers. And that's because he is holding these guys accountable even for the little mistakes. That's how you set the standard. That's how you hold everyone accountable. And that's what the good coaches do for their football team. So Matt Eberflus is already showcasing great leadership as a head coach of the Chicago Bears, and I absolutely can't wait to see what this means as the season gets closer, as we face the 49ers in week 1 of the NFL season. Number 5 on my list is that Kyler Gordon was tested out at the nickel cornerback spot and outside corner along Jalen Johnson. Obviously, I feel like an ideal starting lineup for the Chicago Bears in that secondary would be Jalen Johnson at cornerback 1, Kyler Gordon at cornerback 2, and then I would really like to see Thomas Graham Jr. Get the starting nickel spot for the Chicago Bears defense. But once again, I know there was a lot of skepticism about how Ryan Poles drafted 2 corners with his very first 2 picks in the NFL draft. But I think it's going to play huge dividends for the Chicago Bears defense, as I think between Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, and then even Tavon Young, adding him in there, Thomas Graham Jr., Jaquan Brisker, I think the Chicago Bears will have a very good secondary for years to come. And obviously, as training camp goes along, they're going to test these different guys out, these different positions, right, and see what they're comfortable with. There may be some packages where Kyler Gordon does play in the nickel. There may be some packages where we see Jaquan Brisker play in the nickel package, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how they mix these guys around and see how it shapes out for the Chicago Bears defense. Number 6 on my list, which was a pretty interesting thing to hear, was Eddie Jackson was seen fielding punts as Bears will test him out as a punt returner. Obviously, if you guys remember, Eddie Jackson had a lot of success fielding punts for the Alabama Crimson Tide back in his college days. So he does have experience fielding punts. So we're just got to see what this leads to. But I'm definitely a fan of the idea of Eddie Jackson possibly being the Chicago Bears' new punt returner. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for the Chicago Bears. And the last thing on my list for some storylines of day 1 of Chicago Bears training camp. And obviously, I can't end this video without talking about Justin Fields. But Justin Fields has already explained how he already feels more comfortable at camp going into year 2, which is an absolutely good thing. That means Matt Eberflus and all the other coaches, including Luke Getsy, Andrew Janocko, the quarterbacks coach, are all doing their jobs of making Justin Fields feel comfortable. And obviously, there is a lot of expectations for Justin Fields going into year 2 from Bears fans and obviously from this new Chicago Bears coaching staff. But I feel that Justin Fields has put in the work, and he has been grinding all offseason. I think he is ready to showcase his skills. And obviously, he has every right to feel more comfortable, right? He is going into year 2 as the unquestioned starter. There's no QB competition. He's going to get all the reps. So I'm pretty sure this coaching staff is going to put him in the best situation as possible to make sure he takes major strides in year 2 as the Chicago Bears quarterback. And I am super excited to see what Justin Fields does this season. So those are some of the big storylines that I wanted to come on here and talk to you guys about for day 1 of the Chicago Bears training camp. And as I explained earlier in the podcast, I'm going to try to come on here every day and give you guys the updates on the new storylines for the Chicago Bears training camp. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Geek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, be back for all new Bears podcast right here on Geek on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You can go